Hello at everybody. This is Aradia from the future, popping in again with another important announcement before your podcast gets going. Now that we are into the new calendar year, it is time to look ahead to the cons of 2021, particularly SpoilerCon. The last 3 years have been increasingly successful events, and we're mixing up who fills what roles this year to keep things fresh. Talyre, our utterly epic Mahale, has decided to step down as committee chair, and yours truly is stepping in to be your humble committee chair this year. We also have a few vacancies currently on the planning committee and are looking for some new members to bring a new perspective into our planning. So we would love to have some of you. Yeah, you, our loyal supporters. We would love to have some of you potentially fill roles on the SpoilerCon planning committee this year. If you are interested in pursuing this further, the details I'm going to tell you next. They will also be available in the description of this episode and will be put on the Discord. And we're looking at about a month of time for you to be able to get your applications in and for us to make decisions and get on to making the project happen. So I'll tell you what the roles available are. The available roles are tech coordinator, who will attend con planning meetings, consult on technical needs to effectively deliver the event, and ensure that all digital content and communications work smoothly during the con. We also need a somewhat ambiguous number of at-large committee members. These are people who will attend the con planning meetings, step into tasks as needed during the year, be able to be an understudy for some of the roles if needed before and during the event, plus being on call during the con to help out with whatever we need. An ideal applicant to the role will have a solid grasp of the needed communication technology, Discord, video, audio, for the role, experience using Google Apps, Drive, Calendar, Mail, etc., to collaborate, or the willingness to quickly learn, because it's pretty intuitive, ability to participate in monthly virtual meetings during the planning process and more regularly in the final month, a commitment to attend SpoilerCon 2021 in person or virtually if we move it online, and also help out during the event. Comfort with working as part of a team, including reliably completing assigned tasks, communicating any issues or concerns, and delegating responsibilities to a deputy, the chair, or another committee member as needed. Some kind of experience or expertise relevant to the role, and an enthusiasm for SpoilerCon and the desire and commitment to make it a success. If that sounds like you, please send a short application to spoilercon@gmail.com by February 11th, 2021, and include what roles you'd like to apply for. You can apply for both. Why you want to be considered for that role. What skills and experience you have that make you well suited to that role. Confirm that you have the time, commitment, and technology and reliable internet access to be on the committee throughout 2021 and to attend SpoilerCon. And also tell me what are your most and least favorite parts of working on a team. Again, all of that information will be posted in Discord and in the description of this episode, so you can read it all again. I really hope to see a bunch of you apply to these roles, and I look forward to working with whoever the leadership team decides to bring on board. SpoilerCon 2021 is going to be a super awesome event. No matter what happens, it's going to be great, and you're all going to enjoy it, and I'm very, very excited to be your committee chair to make this event happen. Okay, on with the episode. There's so many possibilities
Chapter 39, Possibilities, and our symbol is the serpent and the wheel. And the possibilities are the possibilities with, now that Matt's there's all sorts of things she can do with the Band of the Red Hand that she couldn't do before.
Nothing like a Talyre just randomly dropping in with an army out of nowhere the day after you get randomly raised to Amerlin's seat.
Talyre, who happens to be your boyhood friend, who you haven't seen.
She's
in
like,
about a year.
how am I going to manage all this impossible stuff? Oh, Matt, with an army. Oh, that's convenient. I can work with that.
Adjusting her stole, Egwene studied Matt. She expected him to look like a cornered bear, but he just looked poleaxed and sweaty. There were so many questions she wanted to ask. How did Rand know about Saladar? How could he possibly know she had worked out traveling? What did Rand think he was doing? But she was not going to ask them. Matt and his Band of the Red Hand had her head buzzing. Maybe Rand had handed her a gift from the sky. My chair? She said quietly. She hoped he had noticed that she was not sweating, nor Elayne or Nyneave. Nyneave, not very much anyway. Suan had revealed the trick. Nothing to do with the power at all. Just a matter of concentrating in a certain way. Nyneave had been rather angry, small surprise, that Suan had not taught it to them before. But Suan just replied calmly that it was for Aes Sedai, not accepted. So far, Egwene had managed to hold her thoughts properly when there were sisters about, and a cool face instead of a sweaty did seem to help their attitudes a little. Some of them. It should do wonders for Matt. If he ever stopped staring and saw, Matt, my chair. Stop there.
That pretty much sums up the entire rest of the chapter. Egwene calmly observing Matt being completely confused and out of his depth.
Completely poleaxed. He's like, what? The Aes Sedai playing Game of Houses on a level above what the Kyrian have ever played before. And Egwene mastering it.
Like overnight.
For the chapter that's not Matt. Overnight, yeah, it's wonderful. So the reason she expects him to be really fearful is because she's like, well, we have all these Aes Sedai. He should be scared of the channelers. But he's not because of the ter'angreal. The ter'angreal gives him a relaxation that she's not used to. He's able to he knows he's not quite as cornered as they think he is.
They can't tie him up with flows of air. They can't do anything to him. Like, they can't do nefarious things. They can't do silly things. Like, nothing.
But they don't know that yet.
No, they're about to.
But he does. They're about to find out.
Something about the mental trick being mental rather than power-based.
Yeah, right. And we know Maggedian lies about that. We see that later.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it's held aside as like, oh yeah, only Aes Sedai can do this, but that it's actually just a smoke and mirrors trick. Like, anyone could do it if they wanted to put in the mental practice.
That's something I've actually thought about a lot, because we never see a non-channeler do it.
But we see many non-channelers turning down the opportunity to learn.
Right. And that's just one of those things where I have to wonder, just because we never see an example of a non-channeler doing it, would it even be possible?
I think it would, if only because there are real-world parallels to this trick. And because the channelers themselves tell us that it has nothing to do with their connection to the source with respect to their ability to ignore heat or cold. With respect to the real world and the fantasy world, it checks out that it's just a mental block, like any Wilder's block, that keeps non-channelers from reaching for, much less achieving, this trick.
I do wonder if maybe some of the more extreme versions, though, require just a little bit of power. Maybe, embracing the power to keep you, fortified when you're really cold or really hot.
I mean, I'm reminded of the monks that can steam dry a blanket with their body heat while in a blizzard. That's a thing.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
Oh,
yeah.
It's yes, it's like the culmination trial of their practice, but I don't have a good citation for it, but I've heard about it many times from many different reputable sources that there's a kind of meditation where you can raise your body temperature such that you can get draped in a wet blanket, walk into a blizzard, and come back toasty and fine and dry.
Isn't metabolism a wonderful thing?
Yeah, right? So in that respect, I want to think that non-channelers could achieve the same effect here in this world, but at the same time, they're not going to be living in a monastery for years to learn this practice. Whereas
right.
A channeler, right, because of the channeling, they get that accelerated learning process into their mental focus, so you might be onto something there.
Yeah, I have to wonder if maybe there's an accelerated feedback, you can get into the groove, and because you get in the groove, you can sense the power, and that's like a feedback that helps you like meditate better than someone who's a non-channeler who has to find that groove all by themselves.
Right. Yeah. It's a very reinforcing kind of thing. Kind of like how if you hold the power and stand on a spot, you can make a gateway there, whereas you'd have to camp there overnight without holding the power. Like that sort of scale up. Yeah. I'm with Inara. Like, I want it. I want it so bad. But
this is the thing is like, if this was something anyone could do, I could do it. And I can't. Trust me. I've tried.
I would not say that I've ever given it enough of a try to truly say that it doesn't work. Yeah, it's not as easy as RJ makes it out to be.
We get a little bit of Chesa, who's just like, gets so upset when Egwene is in any way, like, doesn't accept her help or isn't, I don't know. She wants to help. Chesa is a legitimately good person as far as I can tell.
A little bit passive aggressive.
Sure, but like, that's kind of what a servant has to be in this situation. Like, Egwene doesn't take care of herself. She doesn't eat enough. She's sitting on a fucking hard wooden bench, and like, she's debating over whether or not to sit on a cushion. Seriously, Egwene?
Yeah.
It's a cushion. Put your butt on it. It's not that hard. You're not lessening yourself to have a cushion to sit on.
So what I'm hearing is that Rand really needed a Chesa.
Yes. And he had the women, he had the maidens in his life to sort of humble him and make sure he was being taken care of.
They did not use cushions on chairs. They used cushions and no chairs.
Well, no, right, but they made sure, like...
Yeah, they made sure he ate and slept and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they took care of him. They did, in their own way, but they still took care of him.
But yeah, Egwene is better at accepting that sort of help than Rand is. Because we have an entire army of maidens, a double fistful of Aes Sedai, plus Min, who all add up to about one Chesa's worth of support, and he ignores it way more than Egwene does.
And Egwene accepts Halima's support as well for the headaches and the massages. I mean, not that works out, but...
Egwene accepts that she needs to be at the top of a team, not totally flying solo.
Gosh, it's only like almost like women work better together than men do.
I mean, I would say like with the like gender role stereotypes, but like honestly, in this case, I'm gonna make an exception and not make that complaint.
So, and then Matt, basically speaks up, and now we're seeing it from the other's perspective, where he's like, "You people are mad. Like, you're gonna get your head cut off. You're going up against as they say, what's the most terrifying thing in the world? To look up and realize your classmates are running the world." I feel like Matt is experiencing that right now, where he's like, what are you doing? You, my village, who I grew up with, are deciding you're challenging the most powerful person in the world who we've been told runs everything, and like, no, what? What are you doing, you idiot? You're gonna get your head cut off. Like,
which is hilarious because he's there with an army on Rand's behalf as like, King Rand. Like, I'm just saying, like, the group is moving on and leveling up.
The group has moved on. And this is the biggest problem with the male and female dynamic between the Village Five. They all see each other as the idiots that we saw in Eye of the World as they left Emond's Field. They haven't grown up with each other while they have grown up independently.
Yeah, a lot of this discussion that I see with Matt in this chapter is very much a infuriatingly patronizing but fundamentally well-meaning older brother kind of energy. It's this very much like, okay, come on, like, your tea set is, like, we're done with that game now. That's how he's approaching her. It's like he's looking out for her, but totally infantilizing her and trying to protect her, and she's like...
On the reverse side, they see him as this, Nyneave sees him as this irresponsible rascal who has no, can't hold down a job and steals pies. Meanwhile, he's at the head of an army who respect him as much as any army has ever respected anybody.
Oh yeah, I have things to say about Nyneave. I have strong opinions about her physically assaulting Matt for no fucking reason.
I'm not surprised. I was like, let me go ahead and highlight this and step the fuck back and let Aradia talk about it. Because I really do feel like that's the next thing to talk about is, he basically is telling her, come on, get the fuck out of here. and we'll be gone before this bunch of goat-brain lunatics can blink.
Nyneave had seen Saidar fail around him, but she had dealt with recalcitrant men long before she learned to channel. With a muttered growl of "warm my bottom" that Egwene did not think was intended to be heard, Nyneave deftly hiked up her skirts and kicked Mat squarely in his, so hard that he staggered all the way to the wall before catching himself with a hand. Elayne burst into laughter and suppressed it just as quickly, but she still quivered, and her eyes shone.
We all enjoy some good slapstick.
It's slapstick, but Egwene's laughing too, and he's limping after this and carries a very intense grudge towards Nyneave that has unpleasant friction in it for weeks.
But I also think he may be exaggerating the limp a little bit just to be like, oh, you kicked me, I'm limping. Like, she kicked him in the ass.
She hiked up her skirts and kicked him squarely in his ass.
I mean, it wasn't the balls.
It wasn't the balls, but
it wasn't very nice.
What I find most infuriating about this is how much it sets up their reaction to Tylen.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first reaction to hearing that Mat was sexually assaulted by Tylen is to laugh at him and to say he deserved it. And that's literally what's happening here, is he gets physically accosted by Nyneave for I fundamentally do not understand what reason. And the very first reaction is laughter. And there's never like any remorse. There's just, oh, Nyneave, you'd better make sure he doesn't get his own back at you, because that's a healthy way to resolve this conflict. It's disgusting and infuriating and sets us up for Tylen in ways that make me nah.
Yeah, and I have some differing opinions on Tylen, I think, than you do.
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be, again, more unreliable narrator, necessarily, than sexual assault. But that's my opinion on how the story is told and how Mat portrays it. We can get more into it when we get to that section.
Oh, we will.
Yeah.
We don't need to beat that horse right now.
Yeah. But Robert Jordan, especially in a fictional universe, plays up some slapstick comedy for humor. And when you compare it to the death, destruction, tearing people apart, I mean, realistically, some of the things that these characters experience should kill them, right? And so we have sort of this shifted level of violence where, like, a kick in the butt maybe seem like I would never do that to somebody, but, like, you have to understand, Mat's kind of invulnerable in a lot of ways. And, like, in the story, we have a lot of characters who experience physical discomfort in a way that is not physically possible. Egwene's torture would drive her nuts. Rand's torture would have killed him. Like, Mat's being kicked in the butt is just, on a scale of violence in the series, is not that big of a deal. I'm not saying in real life being kicked hard isn't a big deal. I'm just saying on the scale of violence in the series, it's supposed to be a punch to the shoulder, a slap to the back of the head, a pinch, like something to say like, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like what you said to me. And because I'm not good at arguing, I'm being physical about it. But I'm not trying to hurt him long term. It's not damaging.
I don't know that I agree that it's not damaging, because Nyneave is a caretaker for these kids, right?
And she spanked them so many times.
How many times did she kick the kids she was babysitting? How many times did she get away with kicking the mayor or the women's circle? I feel like it's a very bizarre betrayal of her relationship to all of the Emmonsfield kids. And I don't even understand quite why she justified crossing that line. And then look at how Mat treats it. Like, he's like she's genuinely afraid of his reaction because of how he turns around and looks at her from this. Like, it just feels like this bizarre line gets crossed, and I don't know why.
Her response is to this quote from the previous chapter. And you, Nyneave, I ought to leave you here, and if you want to come, you can. Only I'm warning you, if you yank that braid at me just once, I swear I'll warm your bottom. And so her response then is, warm my bottom, will you? And then she kicks him for that. So it's for that line in particular that she's kicking it.
Right, which definitely makes me think of Perrin and Fael in the Ways, which is a whole level of skin peeling off cringe that...
I feel like Jordan portrays minor physical slapstick violence in a fictional way that, like, we watched The Three Stooges. We know they're not poking each other's eyes out. We know they're not, getting hit over the head with whatever, heavy beam that is. We accept that as funny slapstick comedy. And that's the kind of comedy that Jordan is trying to write into his books. And I feel like a lot of people are taking it a little too seriously for the physical violence that it is, rather than the slapstick it's supposed to be.
I can see your argument, but I personally hate slapstick humor entirely. So I'm having a hard time empathizing, but I can see your argument.
Right. And the behavior isn't right, but I'm just saying he's not writing it in there to be Nyneave abusing Matt.
No.
That's not his intention as an author.
No, I was not saying that.
His intention as an author is to be funny.
I agree that
his intention as an author
written funny
is to look, she kicked him in the butt, he's limping away, isn't that funny? Like, she's not very good at controlling her emotions and is resorting to physical violence, and the two of them are both hypocrites, and then it results in this inability of either of them to communicate, which breaks down into this physical violence that is very slapstick.
Yeah, I agree that that's how it was written, and I have never liked this particular sub arc because slapstick just doesn't do it for me. But you're right, it's very much what he wrote, and for all that it's not my jam, it holds up. It does hold up in that regard. So but it does. The fact that they laugh at him getting kicked does echo what happens with Tylen. So.
And this is a microcosm of that argument. I would argue in the same way. He's not writing that to be a reverse rape scene, or he's writing it to be a comedic. Matt is finding himself in the opposite role that he's used to because he's in a society where the roles are generally reversed and the power dynamic is generally reversed, and he's not sure how to deal with that. And that's supposed to be funny.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings about how the fact that he meant it to be funny doesn't make it funny. But I would like to contain that discussion to a couple of episodes where it makes sense to get into it.
Right, because we don't have a lot of evidence in front of us here. I think just the fact that this particular incident feels echoey of that incident has gotten us sort of off on that topic.
Yeah, I think we'll circle back around to it at a more appropriate time. And in the meantime, we can move on towards this chapter.
So this is Egwene in her peak manipulativeness, as far as I can tell. That she has this new tool, and she's trying to figure out how, A, what tool she has, and B, how to use it.
So my next thing I had highlighted was the Egwene, you've jumped out of a tree toward a bear pit and you think everything is fine because you haven't landed yet. That was the next thing I had highlighted.
I love that quote.
It's so funny because it's so true.
It's
also
true.
that dream or vision she has of Perrin at one point where he jumps off a cliff and says, "There's nothing to be done. I must learn to fly before I reach the bottom."
Oh, sure.
It's almost literally that.
Just... and becoming Aes Sedai or Amerlin Seat is very much jumping off that cliff.
Oh yeah. Talk about building your wings on the way down.
Yeah, fortunately she has like a parachute and so on.
Yeah, pretty much. And she's got a couple of wrenches in Nyneave and Elayne.
So here's my question. What do you think about her argument that Matt is Dragonsworn?
I think it makes a lot of sense with respect to the public face of what's happening. I think she's right about the PR angle of this and how that's going to create dynamics with the masses of people that could make it a problem. Even though I agree with Matt that he does not see himself as Dragonsworn and never would.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I think of the Dragonsworn as all those people who swear to the dragon and don't obey him.
Yeah.
They swear to the idea of the dragon rather than the persona of the dragon.
Right.
And that's where the prophet takes over. And that, like, the prophet is like, I'm speaking in the name of the dragon. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, you're speaking in the name of Missana.
Yeah, I think Perrin ends up scooping up a lot of Dragonsworn into true legions of the dragon, so to speak.
Sure.
But that's, much, much later. I agree. I feel like I also Dragonsworn are the people who have uprooted their lives because of the dragon. but they're being picked up by whatever snake oil salesman prophet crosses their path.
And frankly, a lot of them get wiped out. They're part of Messana's army, and they become the front line against Malden.
Oof.
The Shido wipe out the vast majority of Messana's Dragonsworn.
Yeah, that whole cannon fodder setup was like, I'm rooting for you all to get massacred, and I'm uncomfortable with this.
I was actually, one of the things I really wish Perrin had wiped out Messana and purged the madness from the Dragonsworn and, like, had them be part of his army. That's one thing where I kind of wish he hadn't just used them as fodder, because Jordan really set them up as bad people who were doing terrible, terrible things to the countryside and unredeemable. So I get why he had to kill them all. At the same time, like, seems like a decent army who swear to Rand if he just stepped in and instead of sending Perrin to show up in ages, like, swooped in himself and been like, Messana, what the fuck?
You mean Massima, don't you?
Am I saying Messana?
You were saying Messana.
I did mean Massima for all
okay.
of that.
At first I was like, yeah, Messana's totally the one driving this. I was like, wait, Grandal's the one driving this. He means Massima. Shit.
I do mean Massima. Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. It's
I blame the IPA.
I will accept that excuse, Your Honor. But I agree. It was a shame that Perrin was not able to redeem Massima's masses. Because like, they weren't like Padan Fane's followers, right? Massima was corrupted by Grandal, but he was not fundamentally a dark friend. That wasn't where he actually started.
He was a fanatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Which Jordan doesn't like fanatics either.
No, he doesn't. And I agree with Jordan on that very strongly. But it's, Perrin was able to redeem the part of the White Cloaks that Galad had already redeemed. So, there was a pre-filter there. But it's a shame he wasn't able to capture Massima's army, or at least some of them. It's a real shame.
That did seem like a waste to me when he threw away that entire...
It's like the Shido of the masses of people that are not Aiel. Was all the people that were drawn to Massima's particular interpretation of the dragon. I wonder how many Dragonsworn, like what we would consider Dragonsworn, people who were uprooted and ready to follow Massima, never actually had the chance and just wandered around as, like, internally displaced refugees for the entirety of the series.
There's a lot of refugees, although they do talk about how, I think particularly in the last 3 books, almost all the refugees get swept up into some sort of army or they starve to death. It's like, there's no food, so the only way to get fed is to join an army that has a supply or, a Taviran keeping the food safe.
Oof, that's rough. Starve or serve in the army of battle down to the last man while the dragon decides to resolve a metaphysical argument with the Dark One. That's a really rough bargain.
Welcome to the last battle. Have a good time.
Quite.
Yeah, that's why it makes a lot of sense to train and become part of the army early rather than later.
Yeah.
Because
much better odds of surviving. If only because you get elevated to command positions faster.
And, like, have some modicum of training for more than 6 months or a couple of months.
Yeah, the farm people that are being pressed into using plowshares as swords while malnourished. That shit's brutal.
Woo! Yeah, we don't talk about them a lot, do we?
No, we don't. They're a very interesting sort of static backdrop filler thing. Like, oh yeah, and then there's masses of refugees, which is, pretty on par for how the real world works, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
We should think more about, like, what are the stories of the Dragonsworn occasionally.
That's a good point. Yeah, we don't get a lot of stories from the quote-unquote common people anymore.
No, Oliver, maybe.
Yeah. I was actually reading an interesting article that the vast majority of the women in the series are channelers, whereas only about 40% of the men are.
Oh, that's interesting. You get hardly any unpowered women POVs.
Uh-huh.
Oh, shit. Oh, I hadn't noticed that. But now I'm going through it, and I'm like, so there's Min.
There's
and
Min. There's Brigida.
There's Min. That's a very short list.
Brigida.
Yeah, Brigida.
A little bit, occasionally.
She's got superpowers, but yeah. Damn. I had never noticed that disparity. Fael. Yes. There's definitely
the most hated of all perspectives.
I mean, I have the least ease defending Fael, let's say.
The thing is, I really enjoy Fael's perspectives. What I don't like is parent perspectives around Fael. But I really like seeing things from her POV. What I hate is his inaction based on her smells.
Yeah, she's a very interesting mind to be inside. Her POVs are very interesting. There's definitely a lot of strong women who show up without power, but almost all of our main book-to-book characters that are female have the power.
Matt is basically saying, hey, I know, fine, go ahead and be Amerlin. Go ahead and swear fealty to Rand, and he'll take care of everything for you. I think that makes tons of sense.
Yeah.
They can just go ahead and swear fealty to the... Why don't they just swear fealty to the Dragon Reborn?
Because Aes Sedai arrogance knows zero bounds and has no chill.
Well, and the idea of swearing fealty to him, like, where Matt's like, yeah, just go ahead and swear fealty to him. That'll work. Like, Matt never swore any fucking fealty. Are you kidding me?
I mean, that's fair. Yeah. On the one hand, he's like, how dare you think I swore fealty to Rand? Also, you should totally swear fealty to Rand.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a bit of a hypocritical bit of whiplash.
Just a little bit.
Slightly.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah. But he thinks they're in such a fucked position because they don't have the White Tower.
Right. I mean, he's missing a lot of information to understand how they are not completely trying to pull water uphill with a sieve.
He's no Gareth Bryn.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't know about Gareth Bryn being there yet. Or no, he didn't before he got this whole track set in his mind. He knew about it before because Vanning came back with that news. But that was like 40 minutes ago in the story. So he hasn't had a lot of time to process what that means.
And he's not as good with the social stuff as Gareth Bryn was. Gareth Bryn knows all the backstory. He knows everything that's going on.
Right.
Like, he understands Aiel. Aes Sedai.
Yeah, Gareth Bryn's been around this kind of block before in a way that Matt has not.
I mean, Gareth Bryn is a block that you go. Gareth Bryn is a block you walk around.
Fair. A sturdy block of stone that the river would part around. Right. I'm describing Tam.
Well, however I deal with Rand, she said coolly, you can be sure it not be leading Aes Sedai to swear fealty to him or any other man. Cool, and not at all arguing. A calm statement of simple facts. Oh, man, these two are just so pissed at each other right now.
So petty. So snarky. Oh, my God.
And then there's this just, like, I'll talk to you again when you're ready to listen to reason, Egwene.
Oh, my God. So petty.
Wow.
I want to slap him.
Wow.
Repeatedly.
If I ever said that to anybody, you know what, Aradia? I'll come back when you're ready to listen to reason.
Never in the history of being told to calm down has anyone ever calmed down.
Listen, just calm down. I'll talk to you again when you're ready to listen to reason. Aradia. Can I just use that line on you from now on, just all the time?
I mean, if you want me to steal your business and trash your reputation.
I mean, I'm not against it.
You guys heard it here first.
Seriously, like, that is insulting. Even I'm like, ooh.
But again, I think this points to how betrayed he feels by being, like, kicked in the ass. You know, I think he is feeling, this is the Stone of Tear, like, squared as far as his sense of indignation. Yeah. And he's like, I have been here, done that, got the t-shirt, and I do not appreciate doing this again.
Yeah, because again, he's there to help out. And so, the next thing he really says is, you, my fine lady, talking to Elayne, I am taking that back to Kinlan. I'll tie you up in a package and hand to Rand, burn me if I don't. And that is actually a clue for Egwene.
Yes.
Later, to realize that he has made a promise to take Elayne back.
The kind of promise that will see him through everything that is Abu Dar and the Golem.
Right.
Also, there's a quick little mention here about, is Tom Marilyn around? Because this is when Tom gets the letter.
Oh, that's right. Matt has that. I forgot. Nice. I missed that.
Matt is delivering the letter. And he says, is Tom Marilyn here? And Egwene's like, what do you even want with Tom? And I'm, spoilers, us is sitting over here like, it's the letter, it's the letter, it's the letter. This is Moraine's rescue, like getting another step down the road. which is fun. Yeah.
I was like, oh, I just assumed he like wanted to see Tom because he wanted to drink with him and play some
it's because
dice or something.
Rand said
he promised to deliver the letter. That's right. Fuck, nice catch. Well done.
I love how much that story is seeded through the whole series, and I never fucking saw how it was going to happen. Like, I believed that Moiraine was coming back, but I didn't know why I believed, and in hindsight, I can see the clues that were leading my subconscious to that conclusion.
Right.
Ugh, so good.
So good. No, that is one of the best twists, is Moiraine coming back. And one of the things that I will say, I think the fandom had called it, been like, here's the various reasons we think Moiraine is coming back, and they had nailed it.
Yeah, it's laid out pretty plainly, but I'm just really slow at these things, so I was delightfully surprised when it happened. But yeah, this is the letter.
I do like that Egwene calls Nyneave out for kicking Matt. She's like, even though she laughed at it, she's like, you can't go around kicking people or boxing their ears or thumping them with sticks. Like, that is not appropriate Aes Sedai behavior. But it also sort of, I want to say, again, it puts the violence in context. That's something Nyneave did as the wisdom. If someone wasn't listening to her, she hit him with a stick.
Right.
Or hit him in the ears. Like, violence, physical violence, is part of how she dealt with disobedient Two Rivers folks.
And Egwene's having to teach her somehow that the office of Aes Sedai is not a one-to-one transfer of those violent indulgences.
Like, you have to be a little more respectable. You can't spank the kid. You actually have to argue with the kid.
Yeah, like, do you want the respect due Aes Sedai? Well, then you're going to need to stop, getting justice with a stick.
The idea of using physical violence as an Aes Sedai is ridiculous because you have so much more. You can just explode the person. Like, the fact that you have to resort to physical violence is not okay for an Aes Sedai because their physical violence is so much more devastating. It's like, in a lot of ways, being an Aes Sedai and being Perrin are remarkably similar.
Yeah.
The idea that you are so strong, you have to be very, very careful with that strength.
Yeah, and that's part of what, grounds that particular oath about not using the power as a weapon, is because you're so devastatingly overpowered in the face of someone who doesn't have that tool. Yeah.
Suon, when she is picked up by Gareth Bryn for the first time, and he kind of puts her in her place when she can't channel. She's like, oh, that's kind of hot. For the first time I realized what it's like to not be in total control. Like,
it's when she's first
restored, power
differential. Right? And she tries to lift him,
right.
And she can't because...
That's right.
Yeah, and she's like, I've never had the power not be adequate to the task I put it to.
Right, and there's this, again, role reversal of like, oh, for the first time, she's understanding what other women feel like in the presence of physically large men.
Which, like, technically she'd experienced as a teenager, but, like, not in 40 years of her professional career, so, Yeah.
And she was on a boat for a lot of that time. I imagine she was kind of a loner as a kid. So, anyway, he goes away, right? So why does he leave?
First, Matt makes very inappropriate up and down eye motions towards Elayne, which is just... I don't know if that's unreliable narrator or Matt's a fucking creep, because it is Egwene who's seeing this, and she does tend to be pretty much a total prude and very disparaging of Matt. So Matt might just be looking at Elayne to make sure that she's all in one piece and less lasciviously than Egwene interprets it to be.
Right. Yeah, this is one of those places where I go with unreliable narrator, where I'm like, he's looking her up and down to make sure, like, that's Elayne.
Right, and, like, he's feeling snarky, like, giving her the once-over as a snarky gesture would be very understandable in this moment.
Right.
So, like, I don't... Yeah, I think Egwene's perspective is coming through in that phrase. Though then Elayne does say, how can Rand have such a low, insufferable lout for a friend? So that's Elaine's perspective, not Egwene's. That's just a direct quote from Elayne.
I mean, I'm not going to argue that Matt's not allowed.
It's funny, too, to me, because... So I went to a really, really small school that was very much not a public school, and I was friends with my classmates because who else are you going to socialize with? And I kind of wonder how much that applies to the Two Rivers kids, too. That, like, there's 12 people in your generation. Of course you're all friends, unless there's, like, a deep grudge, How much were Matt and Rand friends versus, like, close enough in age that who else are you going to hang out with, right? We get mentions of Eowyn Fingar being, like, a whole 7 months too young to hang out, you know?
Because, like, when you're, like, growing up, 7 months to a year is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, kids of a different grade are weird and stupid and young.
So true.
And, ugh, why would you ever hang out with them? They're terrible. And it just so happens that, like, the grades in this town are, like, 5 people.
Yeah. It's some very, like, pioneer town population kind of vibes. So, you know, when Elayne's like, how can Rand have chosen Matt as a friend? I'm like, well, there may not have been a lot to pick from. Yeah, no. To say nothing of the pattern putting the Talyre together. So, you know. Also, Matt's funny.
Oh, yeah, Matt's funny.
That's true. We don't get to see very much of him before the dagger. It's so unfair. It's so hard to remember that Matt had an entire story before Shadar Logoth.
I mean, he's a dumbass, don't get me wrong, for stealing the dagger. But he was funny.
If you're into slapstick humor, I can imagine that Matt is a very entertaining person. I mean, it's probably how most of his escapades end, right? Is with slapstick punchlines.
Like, everyone complains about Tylan raping Matt, but no one complains about Matt kidnapping Tuon.
I think that's because no one wants to defend Tuon in any capacity. But, I mean, no, it is a very fair counterpoint. It's a lot of agency taking that's happening there. But Tuon also, you know, goes with it.
Not really.
There's several opportunities where she's happy to see.
Eventually.
Because she thinks that she has, like, the omens and stuff on her side, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
That's a...
It's all omen-based.
Right.
Yeah.
She's like, I have to let this uncomfortable situation play out because omens, which is like...
I mean, but then we could talk about the dice in Matt's head.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good...
They control his behavior in the same way that the omens do with Tuon.
I find the hypocrisy of Matt and Tuon's debates around superstition to be absolutely delightful.
Oh, those are wonderful. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Yeah, no, they make me so happy.
It'll be fun when we get there.
But
which we never will at this pace.
No, not at this pace. We're not going to get through the end of this chapter before tomorrow comes around. Right?
Next thing I have is Egwene setting the stole aside because Elayne and Nyneave are so focused on her office.
Yeah, and that's just like, hey, guys, it's just me. Let's talk like we're equals. You know, you have to acknowledge me in public, but in private, like, let's scheme together.
Which reminds me of the very first time we ever see Suan, where she's embracing Moraine and saying, you know, even Lyanna, who's been my friend forever, seems to see my office more than myself. Like, Egwene's already sensitive to that distance that instantly springs up with who should be your closest allies as a person.
No, and in a lot of ways, she's had to put the law down with Nyneave, too, which has in some ways distanced her from this woman, which a year and a half ago was, you know, she was worried about whether her hair being up or down was going to offend her.
Mm-hmm.
And now she has to make decisions about whether or not she goes to a city and how that's going to affect the political future of the most powerful institution in the world. Like, it's a big change!
Yeah, insisting on taking soldiers for your safety because you can't look out for yourself, woman who used to look out for me. That's a massive change. That would be very uncomfortable. I empathize so much with Nynaeve's struggles here, and with Elayne's, for that matter.
And Egwene's.
Yeah. God, I cannot even imagine trying to, like...
being thrust into a position of authority over your friends and your, you know, and someone who used to be in authority over you. Like, can you imagine if you became the dean of a college where you went to college and all your professors still work there? The ones who gave you grades and saw all your terrible mistakes and, like, and then try and, like, be their boss?
And without even having a career track that builds you up to that. Just
nothing.
Dropped into it out of nowhere.
From grad student to dean.
Ugh. Man, I've been binging Madam Secretary on Netflix, and I just recently watched an episode where a president gets made in such a way of a fictional island nation. Like, just some intern, but when the entire parliament gets wiped out, like, he's next in chain of command because that was his summer gig. Like,
nice.
I'm watching the episode thinking, like, that's like how Egwene felt, but minus the island situation.
If you're in the Stormlight Archive, it kind of reminds me of the kid who gets resurrected by Lift, and, like, they elected him as king because they figured the next king would die, and he got resurrected. So, But he was just like a street kid who got resurrected at the right time at the right place.
I mean, arguably the best people to be in positions of power are those who didn't seek it, but
well,
still.
I don't want any power.
Oh man, having to adjust to the masses is one thing. Having to adjust to your friends is a whole other thing. And that's what Egwene and Nyneave and Elayne are all really early on in struggling with in this chapter. We see this conflict go on for books before there's any kind of resolution.
Matt, too. I mean, Matt adjusts, and Matt does that great thing. I love that scene where he, like, they're not giving Egwene the proper respect, and he, like, bows down to her. Such a good fucking scene.
He glares at Talmanes, and the whole band goes down with him. Oh, God. I love that scene so much.
and that, in a lot of ways, makes up for his reaction when he first saw Egwene with the stole on her shoulders, and he snatched it off. Like, he legitimately thought she was faking.
Yeah.
He's like, what are you doing, you moron? Like, you're gonna get in trouble. Like, because the idea of taking a fucking... Again, same thing being like, oh, my idiot friend who just, like, went to grad school is pretending to be the dean of a college. Get the fuck out of there. You're gonna get in trouble.
Right. Yeah, but then once he realizes, he uses his power and his social capital to be like, here's a big ol' symbol, and it's beautiful.
He's like, well, I'm gonna use my power to support your power, because then we both get more powerful.
Nuh-uh. It's so great. It's so delightful, especially in light of this conversation.
There's a couple of things that they discuss in this chapter and dismiss that I've heard as sort of plot, quote unquote, holes. Things like, why doesn't Elayne go to Rand? And, like, they discuss it here, and, like, we just think Abu Dar is more important. We just think that, like, fixing weather is more important, and Elayne needs, because she's the one who found it with Need, she needs to be there. Like, she just does.
This is just too fantastical. Politicians putting climate change ahead of their ambitions for power? I can't believe this. This is breaking my imagination. I honestly kind of disagree with Elaine's reasoning here. I feel like she should be going to Camelin, but I also feel like she's making the best choice she can with the information she has. And I get it.
Yeah, I really kind of feel like I wish Egwene had sent Elayne off to Camelin and somebody else with Nyneave. I kind of like this decision. This is sort of the decision point. It's like, at this point, the Amaryllis says, do you want to go to Camelin? Do you want to go be queen, or do you want to go to Abu Dar? And they decide that Abu Dar is more important. And that's a decision they made. The Bowl of the Winds clearly was super important. Could they have found it without Elayne? Would have Elayne been better off taking power in Camelin earlier? Would the story pacing have been a little better if Jordan had decided that Elayne needed to go to Camelin instead of go off to do the Bowl of the Winds and who the fuck knows what? Maybe. But he needed to get Matt into Abu Dar.
Right, and he's only going to follow Elayne.
Which is the point that Egwene makes here.
I'm nodding and I'm frowning while I do it, but I'm nodding. Yeah, no, I agree. It's Talyre twisting on the pattern to make irrational decisions work out well in the end. You know, is it an irrational decision, or is it what the pattern needed? We'll leave that as an exercise to the reader.
And they add one more reason, which is, of course, the Terangrial, that Elayne studies Terangrial. Matt has a unique, very powerful Terangrial. If she can only get it from him, she can study it, make copies, and that could be hugely beneficial.
Which arguably does... I, for the longest time, thought that was the stupidest reason, and then eventually you get to a point in the series where you're like, thank God, thank the light
right.
that he let her study it, because we would be so messed up.
So fucked.
So fucked. Right. So it's, for many books, I thought that Elaine's engineering obsessiveness with this Terangrial was a very meaningless little character quirk and all this stuff. And then RJ was just like, actually, I'm a genius. Pen drop. And it was, frustrating and delightful.
But I would agree, the frustration is like, you're friends, let her study it. And then let her give it back. The whole politics to get him to give her the thing and then giving her to give it back, it gets a little frustrating because you're like, dude, you're friends. Let her study it. She'll make copies. And
yeah, she's not the enemy.
She's not the enemy. But Matt has never not seen Aes Sedai as not the enemy. That was a lot of negatives.
Yeah, but you're right. It's it's an unfortunate thing where Matt is unable to see past his own prejudices because he has a lot of good reason to believe his prejudices. Not helped by certain people kicking him.
So here's a question. How did Elayne study the ter'angreal that stops all weaves that touch it?
I really wish we got more POVs from her when she looks at ter'angreal. The way that she understands them is almost entirely off-screen, narratively speaking, and I want to know.
We do get a slight hint here from Moghedien about matrices.
Yeah, aligning the matrix.
Aligning the matrix. Yeah. So there's a little bit about that. And that's what seems to create not Quendiar, but ter'angreal that don't break.
I think there's another comment somewhere when Nyneave is thinking about how Elayne explained making Moghedien's Adom. And it's like Nynaeve's reflecting on how she got lost very quickly on Elaine's explanation. And it sounds a lot like something like aligning the matrix, a sort of quantum entanglement kind of something. But it, Nyneave just thinks about how it doesn't make sense.
It makes me think Robert Jordan really hated linear algebra.
I would agree from my external view on linear algebra via my warder's education. That sounds really accurate. So many matrices.
Fuck that, yeah. Align the matrices. I'm fucking lost. Stop talking about aligning the matrices. I'm done. No more linear algebra. Stop.
Yeah.
I believe Robert Jordan hated linear algebra as much as I did.
There's probably like 1% of the audience that is nodding along vehemently, and we salute you.
And everyone else is like, what? And I'm like, okay, whatever. This is for you, the 1%. If you get that joke, I love you.
Yeah, very much.
So we've seen the band expand, and we're going to continue to see it expand as it recruits more people as they eventually end up traveling.
The big band of the big expand.
And the big grand hand. She had her own scheme, she explained while they drew the other chairs to the table. So she's basically saying, like, hey, I'm not going to join the band of the Red Hand together with the soldiers I already have. I'm going to use them to essentially propel the little tower out of Saladar and towards an actual resolution of this conflict.
Yeah, which is like 5-dimensional chess, as far as I'm concerned. I love how it's like they're like sitting at a kitchen table talking, and she's like pushing the stole farther away, and she's also like outlining a plan that works really well to move some of the most powerful women in the world and one of the great generals into like one of the most important bloodless conflicts that happens in the entire arc of the series.
This is it's a pivotal chapter, and I mean that in the definition of pivot. Like, so much hinges on this chapter. Seems kind of just a boring conversation, but like the entire rest of the plot shifts on the decisions that are made in this point. Like, this is very much bending the arc towards justice type.
It's the fulcrum.
And that's, I think, why you and I are having so much trouble getting through this, is because every decision that's made in this chapter has implications going forward for Matt, the Bowl of the Winds, Nyneave, Elayne.
Egwene.
Egwene. Like, it's just there's so much changes based on the decisions that are made here. It's difficult to talk about the important things because every fucking line goes off into these just massive tangents.
Yeah, this is no 5-page battle sequence to get breezed through in 40 minutes.
No, yeah.
Cool. So I guess the next thing we have to talk about then is the rumors about Ebu Dar and Birgitte. That's kind of...
So are we done with Matt? Is there anything else we want to say about Matt?
I don't think so. Just that Nynaeve's going to be a complete wet blanket about the situation for a book and a half. But, she starts whining here and she won't stop for a long time. But yeah, other than that, I think we're done with Matt.
JC tells some stories about Ebu Dar.
Women fighting in the streets with knives. Oh my, let me clutch my pearls.
Oh my, yeah. I will say, one of the things I really like about Ebu Dar is that Jordan, really does flip society on its head. The women are in charge, and you piss them off, they can stab you.
Ebu Dar is fun.
They can give you they can just give you a cut. They, like, as a man, if you have a cut on your face, it's just assume that you pissed a woman off and that you deserved it.
Yeah, Ebu Dar is one of the few places where I feel like his reversal actually works to give you a real taste.
Ebu Dar and Faldara. Not Faldara.
Nafaldar?
Farmatting.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah.
Farmatting is the only other place where I really do feel like women dominate that society.
Farmatting is like the economic domination, and then Ebudar is like the physical domination.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, Varen and Codswain are both.
Yeah. Farmatting. Yeah.
Farmatting.
Separated by like probably 100 years maybe in birth, but that's an interesting comparison, that those are the two cities where you truly see a matriarchy with a complete set of flaws that doesn't feel contrived. It actually feels, I don't know, it's more holistic than his whole world flipping of the power thing with just the magic. Ebudar is like, no, what if women had the right to abuse men to the point of death without being called to account for it?
Right. Which in a lot of our societies, the reverse is true. Yeah.
When he gets to focus in on a city, he's able to make a more complete argument than when he's trying to make it an entire world.
Fair. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because he argues that societies are different. And I think that is one thing that is hard for newbies to necessarily understand, that like societies are very different in the Wheel of Time. And yes, our main characters are the same and they end up in all these societies, but like Matt and Ebudar is very different than Matt in Cayman.
Yeah.
And that's also, going back to the Thailand argument. We'll get there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely to actually move forward to a Tuon comment, the lion in a cage versus the lion on the plain, right? Like, you've got your unreliable narrator and you've got your different environments make for different responses. Those things interact. And RJ somehow manages to surf the turbulent thing in the middle and make us completely incapable of staying on track.
Egwene has been in town, and she takes one look. She sees Brigida. She knows exactly who Brigida is. Because Brigida is literally shooting a silver bow with a blonde braid. And she's like, yeah, I recognize you. I saw you in Talyre and Riyadh.
You are you.
I don't understand why you insist on keeping the secret from me. And it's Brigida wants to do it because she feels she needs to keep it. She wants only the minimum number of people to know her secret.
It's a little bit of an obsessive compulsive like coping mechanism for her to keep that circle tight. And it's like, you need to make an exception for Egwene. You just do.
You really do. You really do. And she never does.
She does.
But it's like Egwene knows. She does. Well,
there's a meeting. It's off screen, but it's enough that Elayne's able to speak freely with Egwene, and this awkwardness in this chapter does get resolved. But it's
right. It feels like it takes forever.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It definitely takes a while.
It's like Egwene knows she's a dreamwalker. She's seen you. She was there when the horn was blown.
Yeah, but like Brigida fundamentally is a soldier. She's a very stubborn, goal-driven, narrow-focused person. I love Brigida, but like I can see why she's so fucking stubborn about this. Is because it's her soldier's impulses. Like, chain of command. I'm going to hold on to the chain of command. It's like, that's nice, but you're more than a soldier right now. You're a weirdly displaced hero.
And Egwene is just like, she wish she knew the why of it and the how. And, we saw it. It was Moghedien pulling Brigida out for revenge. But it's very confusing. He's like, weren't you just, like, existing in the dream world and all of a sudden you're real? How did that happen? Like, and especially as a dreamwalker, that's gotta...
Yeah, like, I have questions.
I have many questions.
So many questions. God, if she had been able to actually talk to Brigida about how to dreamwalk, she could have gotten a whole other scale of level up.
Yeah.
To get Talyre and Riyadh explained by someone who lives there.
I wonder if she'd be willing to pass on some of that knowledge and just be like, no, that's for heroes only.
I bet she probably would pull the precept card all over again. Yeah. For sure. But just imagine. I mean, because we see her go in as a waking person, right? There's that time when she takes some of the sleeping potions so she's able to get in briefly.
Yes.
I forget who
she's like, oh, this is just like being there. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like if she had been able to like do that more often, like if she had chosen to do that more often and share that knowledge, like that would have been a whole other scale of training that the Saladar Aes Sedai would have had on their side.
I think we had that me and I was gonna say Patrick had that conversation early on. Well, not early on, but we were like, why isn't Brigida training them? Like, why the fuck aren't they giving her one of the Terran Rial and letting her train them in how to use Talyre and Riyadh? Like, she is better than any Dreamwalker.
Yeah. It's got to be her reluctance from the precepts and stuff.
It has to be. Because, like, give her a ter'angreal, and she's in there, and she's like, yeah, this is just like it was being here in between. Like, right. I have all the same skills. I have all the same abilities.
But it would be super OP.
It would be.
It would completely break the entire game. So we don't get that.
Yeah.
It's right up there with Quendiar engine parts and viewing platforms armor from above. And just so many things that people like us can think of how to break the world with the system. And Archie's like, well, no. How about that?
We didn't think about it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because it's a magic system that doesn't exist in the real world. And there are holes that we have to accept.
Following up next is a quote about Matt, which I feel like is something we've heard before, but he seemed to have an uncanny knack for picking women who wanted to be chased, even the most unlikely. And I feel like that is, in a lot of ways, redeems Matt. Mm-hmm. That we see him as this womanizer, but he never, ever, ever chases anyone who's not at least giving signs that she's a little into it.
And the fact that Egwene is the one giving us this perspective says that Matt, although he could use more elucidation on the full definition of consent, understands the basics of consent.
Right. And understands at least the basics of interest.
Yeah, and I mean, he's such a people person. I'm not at all surprised that he's good at picking up on signs that are really subtle. That very fits with him.
Totally. He's slept with enough women at this point that he's picking up on the subtle signs that I've never seen in my life. So, good to him. I wish I had Matt's ways with women. Oh, that's all I'm going to say.
Me too.
Yeah. Really? That's something I don't know.
Who doesn't like a beautiful woman? That's all I'm saying.
I'm nodding.
And to loop back to one other thing, I love that Egwene would bet on Matt against Elayne by a whisker in a contest of stubbornness. I adore that little, like, she's taking a private bet with herself. Like, oh, Elayne's going to bring Matt to heel, huh? Matt's going to win.
Yeah.
It's going to be amusing on the way down, but he's totally going to win.
Yeah, I mean, so there's this, like, male versus female, but there's also Two Rivers versus outside. And she has a lot of pride in the Two Rivers.
Their stubbornness is unmatched.
It really is. It really is. And she knows that.
Yeah, I like that. By a whisker.
They're trying to plumb Moghedien's depths and trying to figure out what all... They're like... So Nyneave is off talking to Janya about various lost talents. And then they're trying to figure out, like, the names of lost talents so they can go to Moghedien and be like, hey, here's a name of a lost talent. What the fuck was that? And how do we do it? Because you haven't been straightforward with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much, like, sketch world building that happens here where it's like, you know what? You can just imagine and find out. That's all you're going to get from this. Milking tears? The companion says that it's mentioned once in Lord of Chaos. That is the entirety of what the companion has to say.
Spinning Earthfire? Well,
that makes me definitely think Broken Earth. That's gotta be some sort of weird crossover from the parallel universe in which Broken Earth is occurring. I don't know how, but it is. Something to do with harnessing, like, magmatic power or electromagnetic dynamos or something. It's gotta be geology based something.
Could it be Milking Tears?
Milking Tears sounds herbal, like an herbalism sort of thing, some sort of botanical extraction thing.
I was thinking more like pulling something out. No, I have no idea. I really don't know.
Send us your best thoughts, folks. Comment on the Instagram post that has this and tell us what you think.
But there's literally nothing more in the books about this.
Yeah. All headcanons may be equally applicable in this one.
Right. Exactly. We have no invalidating evidence on whatever your headcanon is for Spinning Earthfire or Milking Tears is.
Ooh, send us your fan art. Everyone make fan art of what these things might look like. Yeah.
I'm down for that.
Fan art, because then I can use it on more posts about the podcast. But seriously, I mean, like, this is the kind of thing where, like, all the fanfic, the art, the random speculation, and hashtag theories, like, we can go completely wild because there's nothing here except for a suggestive name.
So they're trying to pull this information out of Moghedien's brain.
Mm-hmm.
They do get the whole, like, Moghedien lied to Nyneave and Elayne about the ignoring heat trick. And they caught her in that lie. Like, that is something, I think we called it out in an earlier episode when she's like, oh yeah, it's totally a thing that just happens over time. We're like, that's a fucking lie.
Uh-huh. And she's convinced that Egwene is going to retroactively enforce the one lie rule and has an actual meltdown.
Right. And it's really like one lie going forward, which, I mean, she thinks she's going to be killed. By the way, Moghedien's not the brightest of the bunch. Like,
no.
She's selfish, she's powerful, she's good at hiding. She's not that smart.
No, she's an Age of Legends con artist.
Right.
Like, yeah, no. She's an incredibly interesting Forsaken, but a particularly smart one or brave one, no. Very much a suck-up and a coward and just not smart. She's very selfish. She's a quintessential dark friend and a fascinating character. But don't imitate her if you're going to be a bad guy. She's not a good model.
I like this conversation between Egwene and Nyneave, where she's like, after that interaction with Matt, it might be best if you don't walk around alone. Yeah, kind of pissed him off. He might want some revenge for you kicking him in the butt.
Yeah, which is just like, it sets their relationship is on a really rocky ground, like up until the end of Everdark,
physical.
Pretty much. It's a conflict that we see much more articulated between Nyneave and Egwene, but there's a similar kind of rift between Nyneave and Matt, where it's like they get into really uncomfortable territory for a while before they resolve it.
Yeah.
But it's mostly off screen and by implication rather than a big long conversation we get to see in the book.
I think it's, I've often brought parallels between Nyneave and Matt because they are both so internally hypocritical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In different ways, but internally they're very similar. And it leads to conflict where the two of them see the hypocriticalness in the other one and it drives them nuts.
Strangely, it kind of reminds me of me and my stepmom's relationship when I was still a kid living with her. It's painfully mirror-tastic.
Don't you hate the most the things you see in another person that are reflected of yourself?
It is the worst. How true that is.
And that's what I see with Matt and Nyneave, is they are so similar, and they see their own flaws reflected in the other person, and it drives them up a wall. It makes them really not get along, because they're like, you have the same sort of denying reality that I have in my own head.
I'm not a hero, he said, plunging into a burning building.
I won't yell at you, she said, yelling.
Mm-hmm.
She yelled. Yeah. She said yelling. She said yelling? Really, Seth? Well done. Well done.
You hate to love them. No, you love to. You hate to see how their love is so misdirected at each other. Wow, Aradia. Okay, yeah. So when did you want to cut recording?
Right now, because the next thing that happens is Sheriam walks in, and I wanted to do the whole manipulation of Sheriam in a part 2 of this episode. So welcome to what may or may not be part 2 of Possibilities. We got off on quite a good tangent last night, and were unable to finish the episode. Alcohol may have had something to do with that. But yeah, we're going to continue Possibilities, and depending on editing, this may either be part of the previous episode or a standalone on its own.
Yeah, there's a lot of Sheriam to discuss, so it may run long.
There is. There's a lot of subtlety in this section, which is why we kind of wanted to split it out.
Yeah, so hopefully we can stay a little more on track, but still run just as long on creating content. We're picking up on when Sheriam enters. Yeah, then Sheriam just does the quintessential knock and enter without waiting to see if anyone is going to tell her to wait for a second. And
of course not, because it's not like she's entering the Amerlin's chambers or anything. Right.
It's not like this is an important person who, may want privacy. That would be ridiculous.
I mean, privacy's kind of important, right?
Especially when you have, matters of magical state to deal with.
Right? Because then you've got multiple people coming in at the same time. And you've got, it's just, this planning is not going well with an open door.
It reflects how much Sheriam thinks of herself as being in control, right? She sees Egwene still as a child that can be manipulated and doesn't actually need privacy because she's, making tea with her dolls? Like, big deal.
Right, with her childhood friends. Like, what is she doing? Like, talking to her, like, oh, she's catching up with her childhood friends.
Yeah, that's it. Like, there's nothing important here. She's underestimating Egwene, but it's also very
absolutely.
rude.
Right. And of course, Egwene is planning on manipulating the hell out of her.
Yes.
Which we're about to find out.
But Elayne and Nyneave are decent at just smoothly bowing their way out and being like, yes, we're definitely not doing anything sneaky or behind your back. Nope, not us.
I love this quote. There were hard words, only what you expect when old friends meet after a long time. Nyneave remembers Matt as a scamp, but he isn't 10 anymore, and he resents it. And if there's anything about their whole relationship, that seems to be how Nyneave and Matt get along.
Mm-hmm. Nyneave wants to forever be that massively more responsible person to the Emmons River kids,
right.
Emmons Field kids, and they resent it. All of them resent it.
Yeah, there is a bit of, like, Nyneave is the mother of all the boys that's going on, in the way that she raised them, and of Egwene. Yeah.
And then she adopts Elayne, just for good measure.
Well, Elayne, I'm not sure if Elayne doesn't just adopt herself into that family.
Yeah.
Between marrying Rand and being best friends with Egwene, it's like no freaking choice.
And going through some really intense away missions with Nyneave.
Right. They're super close.
Yeah, Nyneave is like, yeah, you're the same age as all of these kids that I feel responsible for, and we've gone through some stuff together. So,
isn't she even younger? Is Elayne even younger than Egwene, or are they the exact same age?
I always assumed they were the same age because they're both the same amount younger than Rand.
Right, in the same place in their motivation and
yeah, so they're really close in age. So the disparity with Nyneave is the same.
But yeah, that quote for me is very much like why the two of them, that relationship between Matt and Nyneave is encapsulated in that quote.
But he isn't 10 anymore. He was definitely a scamp when he was 10. Like, let's not get that confused. Totally valid when he was 10. But he's 20 now, and...
Right. It's like when you go back and visit your parents and they treat you like you're just the same teenager you were, and you're like, dude, I have my own house and job, and, like, I take care of myself and make my own food. Don't treat me like I'm 10 anymore. It's frustrating. He's got his own freaking army.
Right. He's like, I'm in command of life and death decisions, and you don't think I can do anything?
Right. You don't think I can, like, wipe my own bottom. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Very much.
And she's like, well, Rand put you in charge. That's not actually in charge. It's just...
like, what? That's how you get in charge, Nyneave. That's how it works. It's like when Matt is like, just because I married the daughter of the Nine Moons doesn't make me the emperor. And they're like, well, that's kind of,
that's kind of
how it works.
Yeah. That is exactly how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the way she, like, manipulate Sheriam, where she's like, oh, I'm not going to talk about exactly what I said to Matt. The uncertainty that she leaves Sheriam in is just brilliant. That she takes her confidence, what starts off as her confidence, and just undercuts it, and then provides no options for her except the one that she wants.
Mm-hmm. It's a very, like, pro Aes Sedai move. And this is also the section in which we have Egwene being very anti-Three Oaths and very cynical about that part of Aes Sedai. It's like she somehow jumped to being this, like, jaded middle career Aes Sedai instead of, like, a bright-eyed accepted. Because we've got at this point, she's thinking about how the Three Oaths can be removed, like, very subconsciously. Like, it's starting to be there a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting transition for me when she goes from, like, kind of being like, oh, these Three O's aren't all that interesting, to fully fucking supporting the Three O's and being like, that is what makes Aes Sedai.
Right.
I never really got that transition. It never really made a whole lot of sense to me as to why she intellectually went from Three Oaths are not good for us to it is what makes us Aes Sedai. I don't feel like that was well established in her arc.
I agree. It comes through her conversations with Swan, and a lot of Swan's processing on that is off screen.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So,
it's the whole like etiquette she gets taught,
but we don't get the process. But at this point, those etiquette lessons haven't been imparted a whole lot, right? She has not really absorbed the etiquette of the Amerlin seat.
They've only spent a little bit of time. They had their first meeting, last night? And they, solidified some plans, but it was only recently that they even started working together. So it's going to take a while before that really gets refined.
At this point, she's thinking the 3 oaths are doing no one any favors, least of all Aes Sedai. This is the exact opposite of this is what defines Aes Sedai.
Right. Yeah. So I was curious if you had any, it's just all off screen, I guess?
We see some of it. We see some of the conversations. We definitely see some of the opinions voiced by Ramonda and Elayne. We kind of get the argument spelled out for us, but I think a lot of what Swan processes is off screen, and we only get little bits and pieces of it. Because she, takes advantage of being able to lie for a lot of her time
absolutely.
as not Aes Sedai. She totally takes advantage of that, even when she gets reestablished as Aes Sedai. And she's like, well, I don't lie to you and Gareth Bryn.
Right, but she lies to everybody else.
For her, the fact that she had to draw that line and was able to draw that line, is what helps her, process that the oath against lying, at least, is very much integral to being Aes Sedai, and so, ergo, the other 2 are. But I feel like we really just see the climax of that process. Even in that, we don't see a lot of the inner anguish, I think. Just the conclusion.
No, we definitely don't.
And I wish we did more, so maybe we can find it as we go through, but I don't think it's there a lot.
So the next thing I want to talk about is this whole using the Oath of Fealty that Matt kind of brought up. It was like, oh, you can go and swear an Oath of Fealty to to Rand, and that's totally going to solve all your problems. And she's like, well, it might, if only because I can use it to terrify the rest of the Aes Sedai into following exactly what I say.
I like how she takes Matt's blasé whatever attitude that she was so offended by and just turns it right around onto Sheriam, even though privately she's very mad at Matt about that attitude. She just, uses it, basically. This seems like a great idea, doesn't it? So simple, so easy.
Oh, yeah, she takes what to her and to Matt and any Aes Sedai is just a terrible idea, and is Matt's suggestion, and basically presents it as though it's her own ignorant attitude.
Yes,
and that throws uses that to manipulate the people around her, even though she knows how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, it's so great. I love it so much. They underestimate her so much. They're like, she's really that stupid, instead of thinking that maybe she's leading them by the nose.
Right. No, and that's when she says over and over in her head, I cannot wait to get rid of this sort of farce that I'm playing. Mm-hmm. Because it's just, she's not dumb, and she's playing dumb in order to manipulate the people around her. And that is the most frustrating thing for her. I mean, who wants to play dumb?
Yeah, nobody wants to hide their intelligence, certainly not to that degree.
Right.
I mean, some people maybe downplay it, but...
I love Sheriam's reaction.
Yeah.
A tinge of fear. I mean, I feel like that's because, in particular, she's black, and it's been ordered for her to keep Rand, or to keep the White Tower separated, and so, well, that doesn't technically apply here. It's about Rand, but I think she's just terrified of Rand as a black friend, dark friend.
In the next paragraph down, it says, in truth, Dallana was the only one who really seemed to fully support Sheriam.
Yep.
So, yeah, we're definitely seeing the Black Aja directive to keep the halves of the tower as far apart as possible. Right. Both those sisters are doing everything they can to make that happen, and Egwene is just not having it.
And remember, Dallana, Dark Friend Alert.
Exactly.
One who's hosting Halima. Yeah. So, Dark Friends supporting Dark Friends is what we got here.
Yeah, that's why I think that, I mean, on the one hand, yes, Sheriam is afraid of Rand because that's just who Sheriam is, but I think it's fear of retribution because we're seeing right here, it's just spelled out, the 2 Dark Friends absolutely support the same thing. I mean, granted, you don't know Sheriam's a Dark Friend on your first read through here, but you do know Dallana is, so that should be a big glaring clue that Sheriam is.
Well, here's my but. She's supporting everybody. So it's hard, are Ramonda and Elayne also?
Well, but at this point, Halim has shown up, so we know that Dallana's a Dark Friend.
Right. But I'm just saying, Dallana, it doesn't give us a clue that Sheriam's a Dark Friend, because Dallana's trying to support all 3 factions. She's not just supporting Sheriam.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a complicated tangle, but I'd say that Sheriam's fear is half for Rand and half for her Dark Friend superiors.
Yeah, the Dark Friend Superior is to keep the tower apart. That's why I think she's so reluctant to sort of go in that direction and needs to be manipulated into it.
Yeah, very much. Egwene keeping Sheriam off her feet.
Totally. I loved, like, waiting till she's about to talk and then interrupting her.
And saying what she really wanted to hear, like, right as she's on the brink. Yeah, it's so good.
Yep. But yeah, basically what she's saying is we're now in this delicate balance, and we've been able to make preparations to go, without saying we're going to go anywhere. But now the preparations aren't enough. We have this band, and she sort of brings up this argument over and over again that if just a couple of the soldiers take it into their own head, who knows what Matt will do.
It's a powder keg. The pressure's increasing. The sparks are getting closer.
And how much that pressure is there, and how much of that is sort of her, cranking down the lid in order to invent that pressure and make sure that the situation is explosive.
Well, she is fairly certain that she can tamp down, that she can call the bluff off when she needs to, no matter how close it gets to a conflagration.
Yeah, that's playing with fire.
I appreciate her faith in Matt to control his soldiers. But yeah, I think she's...
that is the point.
Playing with fire, and it's dangerous, and I don't approve.
Yeah, I mean, but, what else is going to get these women to move? She needs some threat to get them up off their asses, or else it's just going to be more delay until the sisters end up leaking back to the White Tower over time, and then they end up falling apart as rebels. Like, they have to do something. Like, you can't set up an alternate White Tower and just hope that things are going to work out.
Right, and she is able to trust Matt so implicitly that she can walk up to that extremely dangerous edge and be like, no, it's okay. I can trust this guy. I will be able to pull it off if I have to.
To Matt's credit, I mean, he follows very specific rules. If he makes a promise, he keeps to it.
I absolutely agree with Egwene to have trusted him in this situation. I think he definitely would have done everything in his power to not let actual conflict over some stupid rumors happen. Completely agree with that.
And, what's interesting is in a lot of ways Egwene trusts Matt much more than either Elayne or Nyneave. Because, even when they're in Ebu Dar, it really takes Egwene saying, are you using Matt? Are you actually having him help you before they go to him and get help? And that's what solves the whole problem.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that Egwene appreciates Matt on these levels that maybe Nyneave doesn't because she raised him, and Elayne doesn't because she doesn't know him that well and has just heard terrible stories about him as a rogue.
Because, she sees the strategic value of what Matt has and what he has to offer. She's much more like Rand in that way. And she's like, I'm going to use you because you have all kinds of cool attributes.
Right. The Tavyreness alone is what.
Yeah. All the things he's survived, all the artifacts he's accumulated, all of the scrapes he's gotten out of. Like, why are you not utilizing that? Yeah, I think Egwene definitely appreciates him as a tool much more than the other Supergirls, which is definitely to their detriment.
Such a tool.
Such a tool. Such a rake, specifically.
And then here's an interesting. Ramonda and Elayne arguing about using gateways in the tower. And I feel like this is something we brought up before. Why don't they ever, gateway in and grab all the Terran Grial and the Oath Rods? And, we see the argument here. I always thought it was a bit of a weak argument. That, there's a chance they might be detected, and then there's a chance they might learn how to use gateways. Really?
Yeah.
What's the point of having a gateway if you don't use a gateway?
Yeah, I'm with Ramonda on this one. That's just some nonsense from Elayne and her cronies.
Yep. Mm-hmm. That's them saying down when Ramonda's saying up, in my opinion.
Exactly. Because it makes no sense, and it's worth the risk.
I wish that this is one of those situations where Egwene had taken the opposing opinions and decided to go with one of them,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like she just sort of ignores this argument and then it just sort of fades away.
Yeah, which then doesn't come back to bite them exactly when she gets captured, but does definitely come up again as a point of discussion when she gets captured.
Yeah, and it's not like keeping the gateways away from the White Tower was ever, useful. They got them pretty quickly. Once, what's her name?
After Egwene gets captured, actually, because that's when Bayonin defects. Well, returns, not really defects, but returns to Aleida. So that's actually kind of late. It's after Egwene has taken control of the Hall and moved the army to Tarvalin and really grown into herself. That's when the tower gets gateways. It's very much not now.
No, it's definitely not now. It's late in the book series, but
It's late in her career as Amyrlin compared to now.
yeah. But like, what else do they use the gateways for other than moving the army once?
Communication. They've got the sisters that go back to Saladar for the dovecoats or something like that. Dovecoats. It's a lot of communication. And also they only have so many sisters that are strong enough to do it.
And if they are trying to starve out Tar Valon, the last thing they want is Tar Valon to have gateways, because then it's going to be impossible.
I mean, I agree with the Aes Sedai that if the tower gets traveling, it could be game over, especially if they get it while you're in the middle of trying to pilfer the Oath Rod away from them. I do agree that that would basically end the conflict, like, then and there. But I disagree that that was too much of a risk. You know? Like, yeah, put all your eggs in one basket and go for it. And they don't do that, and that's playing it safe. And I can see why Egwene doesn't go for it, because it's an incredibly bold move to make when you're like not even a week into this new position and you're trying to get your feet under you.
But what a victory!
If it worked, if it came off, if they had the Oath Rod, and it would be such a game changer. Such a game changer.
Some Angreal. I bet certain other items have got to be Angreal. It's the only thing I can think they would be.
It would have been such... It could have, again, ended the battle in the other direction if they had managed to do that and the tower realized that they were completely vulnerable to this new weave. It could have been such a victory.
But on the other hand, if they actually did get all that stuff out, wouldn't that have put it in the hands of some dark friends like Sheriam and folks? I mean, not that I guess Alviarn couldn't have gone down and picked all that stuff up at any time anyway, so...
Yeah, I mean, it completely truncates how Egwene truly unifies the tower rather than just politically unifying it. If we go zoom down to world scale view, like, I'm with Ramonda on this. Elayne's being a putz.
So basically she starts breaking down their options, right? Like, we can't stay here, right? Building up supplies isn't enough. If we stay here, there's going to be something that happens between the band and Gareth Bryn and his army, right? So we have to move. And then she starts throwing out these terrible ideas, right? Well, why don't we go south to Ebu Dar? We're already sending 2 sisters there. And Sheriam's like, an army and half the White Tower is slightly different than 2 sisters.
Yeah, slightly.
Yeah. That'll look like an invasion. We cannot go south.
And they can't take Rand's offer. That's
No.
absolutely not an option. They cannot go to the White Cloaks, which is west. So, oh gee, looks like we're left with heading towards Tar Valon.
Oh, how did that happen? You've told him, as Sheriam says, you've told him the offer's refused. Tell him to go. I wish it were that simple. I don't think he will for the asking, Sheriam. He implied he was to wait right here until something happens. He could be expecting orders from Rand, or even Rand himself. There was rumor in Kyrian that he's taken sometimes traveling with some of those men he's gathered, the one he's teaching to channel. I don't know what we will do if that happens. Sheriam stared at her, breathing quite heavily for someone with such calm features.
Yeah.
She's terrified of Rand.
Oh, yeah.
And male channelers.
Yeah, I think that even without her being a dark friend, that would be her response to news about Rand. It's funny how Egwene thinks in this chapter that Sheriam would definitely have made a good keeper or even a good Amyrlin in other times. So it's like, she's a dark friend! No, she wouldn't.
I mean, other than that,
other than that, and other than the fact that her knees turned to jelly at the thought of Rand al'Thor, Dragon Reborn, which arguably I'm a little bit with Elaida on the whole, like, if you can't even talk about this seriously, then get out of the leadership council. I'm a little bit with her on that. Not with the demoting Aes Sedai part, but just with the maybe don't be part of, like, the 13 people keeping it together. Which Sheriam is not keeping it together when Rand comes up. So I think it's a bad read, Egwene. Just all around bad read. She would not be a good Amyrlin or a good keeper.
Yeah. No, she's weak because she just wants power for power's sake.
Yeah. She has petty, selfish scope in what she wants.
Right, exactly.
But she's efficient at doing the bureaucracy game to get there.
And that's why I do think she would make a decent keeper if she actually, like, put herself to it. And there is a point when I feel like after the declaration of war is declared where she does settle into the role of keeper. And Egwene comments that she's actually kind of a good keeper in that situation.
I think that's because at that point she's not trying to balance impossibly competing factions with her allegiance to the dark. At that point, I think she's on sort of a low simmer back burner as far as orders from the Black Aja, so she's able to just do her job, and yeah, she's decent at it.
There's a gap where they kind of forget about her, and she's super happy about that. And we see that from her POV, and then somebody comes. I forget who comes back and breaks all her fingers. And is it Grendel demands the dream?
No, it's Masana.
Who gets the dream? Masana wants the dream Tarot.
Yeah, she wants to deprive the Aes Sedai of having them. Between Halima leaving, it's like a week or something.
I don't remember how long that is. Yeah, not too long. But yeah, she gets a little bit of peace, and Egwene is like, oh, she's actually being a decent keeper.
Yeah.
She got sucked into a corrupt organization of Dark Friends, and if she hadn't been if the organization hadn't existed, she probably would have been a decent Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know?
She's the everyman that gets sucked into being a bad guy character.
Exactly. Yeah. She didn't set out to be evil.
Yeah.
And she's not really even inherently evil. She's just participating in a power structure that is evil.
Yeah, her kind of evil is the sort that was encouraged when the bore was first drilled, and over the century of the collapse, people became worse in ways that were intangible. Like, she's got the kind of soul spirit attitude that is more easily swayed when that situation comes about, but probably never would have sought out those things without that, like, creeping evil that ultimately led to the War of Power. Yeah, she's a really pathetically tragic character for that.
Very much so.
Damn it, Sheriam.
No, and her death comes as such a relief to her and us.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable how much you can relate to her story, because it's just one bad step in front of another, rather than being like some big masterminding plan to take down the entire world and reality itself.
And she's not like a terrible person like Leandrin.
Right. Like, she's not mean.
Wants to hurt people. She's not mean. She doesn't want to hurt people.
She doesn't kick puppies for fun.
No.
Yeah. None of that.
She's just willing to step on some fingers to get to the top.
Yeah, she's a good mistress of novices. Like, she comforts people and is kindly and protects them a little bit. And, like, yeah, she's evil when it is necessary, not whenever she finds an opportunity.
If we sit, they're going to think we're all Dragonsworn. And if they don't, I'm certainly going to spread rumors that we are. To get us, so we move. I thought that was pretty funny. Egwene's little...
I find that morally gray, but amusing.
Yeah, I mean, we see that a lot from rulers like Pedro Nile and folks who they'll spread rumors so that they can then react to those rumors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, propaganda. It's a very, very time-honored tradition of the political puppet masters.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that in our politics today. There's the caravan was a great example of that, in my opinion. Like, let's create the lion on the southern border and unite against it.
Yeah.
So it's just like creating phantom threats and then using your political pull to get everyone united behind you and, for example, declare war.
Mm-hmm.
Like Egwene does.
Yeah, it's an extremely old, extremely effective trick. It's probably like an entire chapter of Marcus Aurelius quotes about it. Tabitha showed up to bring tea from Matt before. I believe she's a novice. I do think we see her, like, repeatedly throughout the time in Saladar.
Now, this character appears to have two different spellings of her name.
I thought I found that on Google last night. Okay.
Yeah. So I am looking. Her name is spelled Tabiya and Tabitha. So it's Tabitha and Tabia. And in Lord of Chaos, Tabia is one of the 18 novices that Sheriam takes with him when they flee the White Tower. And she's there. Tabia offers a meal to Min and is in a class with Nicola. Then Tabithia. Oh, that's so weird that there's two different...
Yeah, I'm gonna go grab my companion. Because usually the internet reflects the companion, but sometimes not. The companion says, Tabitha, the name by which Tobiah is mistakenly called on multiple occasions. There's actually a correction in the companion for that. I'm guessing because it didn't get noticed until books and books in, and they just errataed it, basically.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe just Egwene doesn't know her actual name and has it wrong, and so Egwene's the one thinking, oh, it's Tabitha, but it's actually Tabia?
Could be. And then the Tabaya entry under that is an Andoran novice with the Rebel Aes Sedai with a potential strength level of 2715, born in 983 and went to the White Tower in 998, taken from the tower by the rebels, has green eyes and freckles, sometimes tries to assume an Arab Aes Sedai mystery and failed, is timid and squeaky. That's hers.
Yeah.
So no hint of being a dark friend or a spy or anything other than a cute little world-building character. She's probably going to be Amerlin someday. Just going to say it now. Calling it now.
It is widely accepted that novice Tabitha, who appears later in Lord of Chaos, is actually Tabaya because she looks the same.
Oh, Egwene, you're already forgetting your roots and the little people where you came from.
I don't know. I assume that's just a Jordan mistake.
Yeah, I would like to think it's a retconned explanation for a mistake that was easy to make.
Yeah.
Because the character certainly seems to merit that kind of confusion around her name. It works really well. So we can headcanon that, Robert. We can do that for you.
But the only way left is north, Egwene widened her eyes. Light, she hated this. It will seem we're moving towards Tarvalin. I know that, Sheriam almost snapped. Drawing a breath, she moderated her tone. Forgive me, Mother. I feel a little... I do not like being forced into things, and I fear Randall Thor has forced our hand before we are ready. I will speak quite severely when I see him, Egwene said. I can hardly think what I would do without your advice. Perhaps she could find a way to send Sheriam to study with the Wise Ones as an apprentice. The thought of Sheriam, after, say, half a year with Sorelia, made her smile so that Sheriam actually smiled back. Honey or bitter? Egwene said, lifting the teapot.
I love that.
That, like, smile, that predatory smile, like, I'm gonna send you to be educated. And Sheriam's like, oh, she likes me. It's like, no, I'm thinking about torturing him.
Yeah. Then honey or bitter? It's just, mic drop. Except it's a kettle, and don't drop it, because boiling water is dangerous.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as, Egwene is like, do I use the carrot or the stick, right? Mm-hmm. She's motivating Sheriam to do what she wants, and the honey, in this case, the carrot, is, you know, like trying to, well, I don't really have a good example, but the stick is like, Rand's gonna come and beat you if you don't.
Yeah, that's kind of where she started, really. She kind of started with stick and then moved to carrot. Yeah. She knows what she's doing way better than all these older women, and it's awesome to see.
And of course, as soon as I hit recording, the software was like, hey, I want to update. I was like, no. Bad software.
Down on
after recording. So I just want to acknowledge that the last recording was kind of a shit show because it was a live video recording, and I was juggling through some of it. If you would like to go see that, please go check out the Malkier Talks YouTube channel. I'm sure I'm going to put some sort of disclaimer on that before it goes, but I'm just going to go ahead and throw that whole episode out unedited for you to listen to. It won't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I think it's appropriate because that was very much Matt's perspective, and it was complete chaos. This is Egwene's perspective about the same incident, and then moving on, and this is going to be nice and orderly.
I like that angle. That's a nice way to salvage that situation.
Spin it? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think about that a lot. I'm like, yes, I meant to do Matt's chapter totally chaotically and crazy and with bad sound and everything because it's a bad chapter. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Moving on. But yeah, we locked in. Hopefully, I finally sent out the emails about guests for the rest of Lord of Chaos. So hopefully we've locked in all those guests. A bunch of people are coming back. A few new voices.
Oh, goody.
Very excited to have everybody on. A few of you are here now.
Well, that's going to be awesome. I love that you're having more and more voices as part of this.
Yeah, so basically after this chapter, we have almost every chapter is going to have a guest on it from now until the end of the book.
Sweet.
So it'll be me, Aradia, and guest. So expect a lot of guests coming up. Sorry, there's brownies in the oven. It's
Man, we haven't been able to get eggs in forever because we're absolute princesses about eggs, and Brandon keeps wanting to make baked goods, and then like it's a whole chemistry experiment every time to figure out the workaround for not having eggs.
Actually, I'm a little confused about that. Why do you not have eggs? Because don't you live in the countryside where everyone has chickens?
Yeah, but they're not laying right now.
Because it's cold?
And dark. It's really dark here. Yeah. It's out here in the Coast Range, it's so dark that the chickens, unless you give them extra light, they won't lay. I mean, the latitude aside, we have incredibly inclement topography. So, at some point, or we'll, go to the hippie co-op and get the good eggs from people that do put lights on their chickens. But we're really, really picky about our egg sourcing.
Oh, can I complain a little bit?
Maybe.
I went to the DMV today.
Oh, yeah, you did. This long-awaited DMV trip. Was it an absolute shit show?
It was okay, and then it was bad. So, to get my license renewed was fine. I gave them my birth certificate, proof of address, and my old license. New license renewed. The issue is, I could not get my quote-unquote real ID, which is the updated license you need to fly on your driver's license.
Right.
Because I am foreign born, I have to provide a shit ton of documentation that any other American citizen does not. Even though I have been in America since I was 2, I have had a license my whole life, I have multiple forms of documentation that were absolutely within the requirements. I have to track down and provide documentation of my naturalization, which I do not have.
Oh my goodness.
To get a license going forward.
And all of this is ultimately leading up to you getting your passport to leave America.
It's so crazy because it's like I have gotten my license now. I've been an American citizen, got my license over and over and over and over and over again. I'm a 39-year-old man. And now I have to come up with documentation I've never had my whole life to continue to get my license.
Man. I mean, in fairness, you are a white male, which is technically the most likely demographic to be a terrorist in this country. Just saying.
No, that's entirely accurate. Yeah, no, entirely accurate. I agree with you. I'm a bearded white male. Like, I might as well be, like...
I mean, you live alone with a dog. Come on, it's like basically a recipe for disaster.
Right, and I have a shaved head.
Yeah.
I'm basically a neo-Nazi.
Basically, right. Pretty much.
Right. That and a Canadian liberal, so...
I mean, you smoke the reefer, you're basically, like, so super commie. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's this real ID. It's entirely... It's a new law passed to, like, because of quote-unquote terrorism.
I didn't realize that the Real ID was going to have new, like, proof of citizenship requirements.
It has more requirements than a passport.
Wow. That's different. I kind of had shelved the whole concept of getting that when, the pandemic shut down all travel anyway. It was like, well, whatever, we'll get to it eventually. I had never looked into it that much. Yikes. Well, hopefully by the time I get around to it, Biden will have smoothed it out again.
I have never felt so alienated as someone who's been an American citizen my whole life. This is the first time I've ever felt like, fuck you, you were born in Canada.
Oh, damn. Oh my god, obscure. Yes, it would be way easier to purchase a gun.
Way easier.
So much easier.
Way easier.
So much easier. Painfully easier. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but anyway, I got my quote-unquote license. So I have an ID. I just don't have a real ID.
So you have like a driver's license, but not a flying permit.
Exactly. I am not allowed to fly or cross borders.
Yikes.
On this ID. Or, no, that might not be accurate. Sorry. I'm not allowed to fly. I don't know what else I'm not. There was something else. I can't remember exactly what I was not supposed to be able to do.
Yeah.
But I can't even fly domestic.
Yeah, that was what tripped me out, because we flew to a memorial in February, and there was tons of signage about the Real ID coming in October, it was going to be a thing. And I was like, oh, well, we'll be getting to it eventually. And then the pandemic happened. I was like, whatever. In a year or 3, it's fine.
And so I'll get that sent off, get my Canadian passport, and I'll just won't have to deal with American ID anymore. I'll fly on my Canadian fucking passport.
Man, yeah, do it.
I reacted in not the nicest way at the DMV. I kind of feel bad about it right now. I kind of yelled at the guy a little bit.
Did you yell at a clerk?
I did. I was a Karen today. I was bad. Frankly, I'm putting this in the after show. Like, I am sick of pretending that, like, I haven't been badly impacted by the Trump presidency, and the Republican Party. What they're doing, I'm going to lose my unemployment here in a couple weeks.
Oh, yeah, day after Christmas.
Because they haven't passed anything.
Fuck you.
Day after Christmas is the last day of unemployment I will get. My interactions with the government have been severely reduced. I've had 0 government support for quite some time. And the businesses that I would like to work for are being forcefully shut and not being supported in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And we're kind of getting fucked from both ends, you know? And it's hard to really keep silent about it anymore. Either Congress passes something in the next week, the Senate passes something within the next week, or your state does something to make up for the gap. And so there may be state-by-state solutions, but federal unemployment is basically, if you've been on unemployment since the beginning of the pandemic, it's going away at the end of the year. You know, but essentially the federal government is funded unemployment up until December 27th, and then they haven't funded it beyond that.
Yeah, and all the state, like
but
the rent moratoriums and eviction moratoriums are all running out too.
Yep. And it's all happening at the same time.
At Christmas. Because, you know, there's nothing symbolic or, you know, mechanically completely fucked about that. Anyone notice that there's a polar vortex moving back in to fuck people over?
Yeah, this is a great time to have a bunch of homeless people kicked out on the, evictions.
Yeah. Right
in the middle of the winter, December.
Yeah, let's
Sounds
just
great.
Evict millions of people because the entire world is fucked in the middle of winter. That's such sound public policy.
Yeah. Sorry about the panic attack, Ken. I'm right there with you.
I'm gonna go get another beer real quick.
Yeah.
I still feel like 15 and I'm 30, so
yeah.
You know. Yeah, I definitely feel like there's a lag for me between reaching who I am and like reaching through all my bullshit to actually enabling who I am, which is why I'm still stuck at like the teenager phase. I'm like, I should be more mature than this, but for the longest time I felt stuck at 13. So the fact that I feel 15 feels actually like a really good thing.
No, and one of the things is I do feel like I am who I am. Like, I'm not going to change. I'm very stuck in my ways at this point. Like, you can sand off some rough edges, but the statue is pretty much fully formed, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I'm finally starting to come to terms with that. That, like, this is basically me. Like, I'm not going to keep getting weird new additions. This is basically what I've got to work with, more or less.
And yeah, I feel like it took me like 10 years to figure that out. Like, I was like me at 25, and then it took me until 35 to look back and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's all I got. What I had at 25 is what I have at 35, which is what I had at 30. Like, you're not going to be a different person. You may learn more things, but you're not going to be a different person.
Yeah. I always thought that all those studies and everything, like it was, like I believed it, but it's a different thing to actually be in the middle of it and be experiencing it. Or there's a quote, I think it's by like Churchill, that's like, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other forms that have been tried. It's just like, my soul, it's shriveling.
Yeah, no, I'm more and more convinced that democracies have a time limit that's around 300, 400, or 500 years.
I have not done enough studies to know that.
Yeah, I've read a little bit of theory on that, and normally I'd be like, that's bullshit, but I've been witnessing what's been going around me, and I have to maybe be like, oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, democracy takes work, and it only takes the problem is you end up having a generational shift where a generation gets handed pretty much everything, and they don't put in the work to keep democracy going. Boomers. And it takes then the next generation to bring it back.
Kelsey, Broken Earth is currently sort of stalled. I have a lot of, like, the housekeeping stuff I have to do for the next episode, and it's the episode where Mayav gets attacked. It's the penultimate chapter of the book, and I started putting it off right when the move happened, and the move is now 2 months behind, and it's just this whole mountain out of a molehill. There's just more and more housekeeping I keep adding to it, like I had all these hot takes about the election, and now they're not so hot takes because it's been weeks since I wrote them down thinking, yes, I'm going to record soon. And so also Broken Earth is coming up on its 1-year anniversary. The first episode went live on like January 2nd. I remember because I had a 5-hour tattoo session that day. So originally it was going to work out that I was going to publish the first episode, or I was going to finish the first book on the year anniversary. And now I would have to do a whole lot of work to make that happen. So the 1-year anniversary might not coincide with wrapping up the first book.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?